Excellent. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us this morning for this year's assessment grant panel. You'll be hearing from the 2021 cohort of assessment grant project recipients today. And you're in for a treat. There's so many great things that they've been doing over the last year and a half, 2 years. And I'm looking forward to them having the chance to share this with you. So for a little bit of context, those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathy Barrett. I'm the Director of Assessment in the Office of the Provost. My job is to support program assessment across the academic and student services programs, both to have continuous program improvement and help us to provide the best programs that we can for students, as well as to support accreditation for the Higher Learning Commission. So this work serves both of those purposes. When we focus on the grant in particular, the Wayne State Assessment Grant is focused on providing funding to support improvements to assessment practices. And projects can be focused on piloting, creating, or significantly revising current assessment practices. Could be looking at the instruments that programs use to assess learning in their programs. Could be providing professional development to build capacity, to build different skill sets, to just broaden the number of people in a program who know how to do assessment and to make it more productive that way. So the idea behind the grant is to obviously promote best practices in assessment at the program level, but also we do that through a couple of strategies. So the first thing is obviously we provide $3,000 in funding for one-time projects, knowing that making change in assessment practices takes time and effort. So we want to have some support in place for that. And the provost values that, which is why he kindly funds these projects. The second thing, as I mentioned, is building capacity and expertise. Asking folks to do a job that they don't know how to do is not the best approach. So finding ways to make sure that people have access to that professional development is really key. The third piece of the assessment grants and this panel today is that we want to share good practices. So give everybody on campus models of what good assessment looks like and how to make changes toward better practices. And then last but not least is very importantly, recognizing the awesome work that the folks on the ground are doing. So the folks like our presenters today and their teams that worked on their projects together. So definitely a round of applause for all of you who do assessment work, and in particular for our presenters today. So what you're going to see in the next hour is that our three presenters will share their examples of good assessment practices and the strategies that they used for improving practices that weren't working ideally in their programs. As I mentioned, this is also a public recognition for the folks on the panel as well as their team members. And last, of course, is we want all of you to think about submitting a proposal for this year's call for proposals. So those proposals will be due June 26th, and I'd be more than happy to chat with you about any part of that process and help you develop and walk your way through that whole proposal, from getting an idea all the way through how do I clean up the proposal and make sure it's the best possible for reviewers. So a little bit of housekeeping. Thanks, Chloe. I see Chloe is adding things to the chat as I'm talking. So please check the chat for links to extra information. A little bit of housekeeping about the format for today. So I'll be moderating. Unfortunately, Darren Ellis, who normally would moderate this, is out on a leave, and so he was unable to be here today. So I will attempt to step into his shoes in that role. Each panelist will have about 5 to 7 minutes to present on their project. So obviously they did a lot more than they're going to be able to talk about in those 5 to 7 minutes. So please think about questions you have, put them in the chat, or at the end of all of 3 presentations, we'll open up the floor for folks to ask questions. So if you'd rather ask by speaking, please put a hand up in the participant list and Chloe will help us get through those questions in order. We are, as you know, recording the event. So while the presenters are talking, we'd appreciate you having your microphones and your videos off, just so that the video turns out a little bit cleaner. But when we do get to the Q&A, please feel free to unmute when you're going to talk and to turn on your video again. So now the important part, some introductions of our 3 presenters, our 3 panelists today. So we'll start with Aline Saad. She's a clinical associate professor and director of faculty development, as well as coordinator of interprofessional education for the Pharmacy Practice Project and in that program. Neva Nahan will be our second presenter. She's associate director of the Center for Social Work Research, and she's representing the Bachelor of Social Works project. And last will be Sarah Maher. She's Associate Dean for Health Sciences, Clinical Professor of Physical Therapy, and before moving into the Dean's office, used to be the Director of the Physical Therapy Program. So I'm going to hand things off to Aline to get us started. She'll be sharing some slides and talking to us for a little bit about her project. Aline, when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Barrett, for the introductions, and bear with me for a second as I project my slides. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for being with us. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Aline Saad, and I am honored to be here and presenting my team on this project. I'd like to start by thanking the Provost, the Wayne State Assessment Grant Team, and my colleagues who made this work possible. The title of our project is Plan for the Assessment and Evaluation of Interprofessional Education and Collaborative Practice within a Doctor of Pharmacy program. And to give you just a little bit of background as to where this is coming from, our program has worked to maintain and expand interprofessional education and collaborative practice alongside other programs at Wayne State for many years. This commitment stems from the value of interprofessional education in improving the quadruple aim of population health, patient experience, per capita cost, and healthcare provider work-life balance in all healthcare delivery setting. It also stems from our program's commitment to meeting accreditation requirements. So our IPE plan was proposed and approved in April 2021, and it includes many required IPE offerings, 9 approximately, many elective IPE offerings, and many co-curricular offerings for our students as well. And so the aim of this assessment project was to facilitate the execution of the IPE assessment and evaluation components, such as data capture and QI initiative. And so really what we wanted to know was, what are we teaching our students through the IPE offerings? And we wanted to understand better, what are we using as assessment tools to measure the achievement of these learning outcomes? And are these the appropriate assessment tools to be utilized for each of the IPE offerings? Finally, we also wanted to capture the longitudinal learning of students and meeting the IPE skills through a longitudinal assessment tool. And ultimately, we wanted our assessment plan to be a sustainable one. So for every one of our IPE offering, we completed a multiple step or multiple part for this project. And they were done in a very specific order, one after the other. We started by mapping the activity learning objective against the IPAC competency, the Interprofessional Education Collaborative Competency, and then we amended our syllabi based on this mapping. We also looked at the assessment tools that are utilized in each activity, and based on the data analysis and the recommendations stemming from that analysis, we wanted to close the loop and improve on our offerings. So these are a few examples of some of our required didactic and experiential courses that have interprofessional education embedded in them. These are a display of the courses along with the assessment tools utilized for each of the courses and some of the recommendations that were based on the analysis. As you can see, we had multiple recommendations made. Some were along the line of, okay, we're doing the job. We don't need to keep repeating this on a yearly basis. Let's cycle that every 4 years. Other recommendations were along the line of, maybe this is a very lengthy assessment tool. Let us shorten this. For example, this was part of our interprofessional team visit finding. In that experience, we also found that we were having our disciplines do the assessment as discipline-specific assessment. And so we unified that and provided now them with a unified care plan that we look at and evaluate our students' achievement after team visit. Other experiences included the famous in our shoes activity that we offer to all of our Eugene Applebaum discipline. There we found that we needed to evaluate again the knowledge questions that we had embedded in that activity and revisit that for better assessment as a better assessment tool. Finally, I'd like to point out the DAO tool, which is the tool that we utilized for our longitudinal assessment. And we found that maybe we needed for that specific tool to consider some demographic data at the beginning to understand if we are capturing our students with coming in with experience or those that are coming in and have never worked in an interprofessional setting. So I'd like to conclude with this key take-home message that we were very proud to find is that at the end of our program, when our students are now ready to graduate, they complete their advanced pharmacy practice experiences. And based on our assessment, we were able to report that the preceptors who oversee our students and their practices were very trusting that our students are ready to collaborate within healthcare teams with patients and caregivers to advance the care plans of these patients. So again, if it weren't for this grant, we would not have been able to complete a very thorough mapping of the activities, revise our syllabi to make sure that this mapping and the learning objectives are found there. We did an in-depth analysis of each of the activities that are provided. And this truly allowed us to come up with assessment-driven changes that optimize the activity and ultimately have a sustainable and practical assessment plan that all of the stakeholders can commit to. So in terms of next steps for this project, we are hoping to be able to implement the recommendations that stemmed from the project, so really closing the loop, and utilized a lot of the data that was generalized that came up from this project for data visualization and dissemination on our platforms. Thank you again to my colleagues, Dr. Gortney, Salinitri, Mrs. Gessler, Anyotri, and Sears, and again for the assessment grant team for their guidance on this project. And now I'd like to pass it to my colleagues for their next projects. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aline. That was fabulous information. Can't wait to get to the end of all three and comment on the cool things y'all are doing. Neva, you're up next, so give you the chance to share your slides and step forward and talk to all of us.
Oops, sorry about that. I practiced just before and I was at the end. Sorry. Hi, I'm Neva Nahan from the School of Social Work, and this project was for our Bachelor's of Social Work program. Norma Love Shropshire is our program director, and she led the team, which included our Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, myself as the coordinator, our manager for research support, and a consultant that we had from the College of Ed, Elizabeth Cora Hopkins. So the context for this project is that our Bachelor's of Social Work program is accredited by the Council on Social Work Education, and the CSWE lays out a lot of standards for our programs. Two of them that are relevant to this project are that the curriculum is designed to develop 9 competencies in our graduating students that will make them good social workers. And that each of those competencies has 2 assessment measures. Our school uses practicum instructor assessment of student competency, which is our graduating BSWs are in a field or are in practicum, and they are supervised by a licensed social worker who rates their performance on these competencies. The second is benchmark assignments that we have in our capstone course, and we collect rubric level data from those assignments in order to see if our students are communicating their ability to, on these competencies. So this assessment grant was really focused on improving our benchmark assignments from the BSW capstone course. And we set out to the following steps. We wanted to make sure that our benchmark assignments were aligned with our competencies. We wanted to enhance the validity of our rubric, that is, were our rubrics really measuring the competencies? And we wanted to improve that intergrader reliability because we were finding that there was great variation by instructors in how they were grading the benchmark assignments. We used our funding to hire Dr. Cora Hopkins. She had done a lot of work in the College of Education with improving inter-rater reliability of assignments. And so it was really good to have an external voice here. We paid our part-time faculty for participating in our training sessions, and we hired our manager, used some funding to for our manager of research support to provide data support during the project. And there was a little bit of summer funding for the BSW coordinator to write up the results. So what did we do? We did rework the assignments to better align them with the competencies. And then we hosted 4 trainings for instructors. We started out with a video on inter-rater reliability that our consultant provided. We had our instructors before the training grade a portion of an assignment, submit that. We analyzed that data, and then we presented that during the training. And we had really good discussions about, well, why did you think that that was exceeded competency? Why did you feel like that was less than competency? And we really surfaced sort of everybody's thinking about how they were grading it. And then we would refine the rubric, and then we did it again. And we did this 4 times. In the end, we ended up with a new rubric, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to lay out what is exceeds expectations, that there's exceptional application of theory, fully connects the case to the theory, kind of goes above and beyond. So we had language that would help us help graders in identifying this. And what did we think we accomplished? Well, we did better align our accrediting standards, our curriculum, and our capstone course. We developed skills on how to improve reliability by going through this process. And we also identified this kind of consensus building process that we did with the instructors. We ultimately revised our rubrics, and we actually now adapted these rubrics across our program. And we think this helps instructors, but we also think it really helps students because they're not dealing with different rubrics in different classes. There's some consistency there. We have lead teachers in curricular areas, and so we're looking towards kind of a train the trainer model where we train our lead teachers in this process, and then they work with the instructors in their curricular areas to improve grading and inter-rater reliability. That's it.
Thanks, Neva. Such a great overview of so many different aspects of your project. And next up, we have Sarah Maher. If you would, Sarah, give you a moment to also share your slides and take it away.
Okay, can you see my slides okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. The project that I'm about to present is the impact of the Schwartz Portrait Value Questionnaire and Computerized Assessment of Personality Characteristics, or CASPER, on physical therapy learning outcomes, a pilot study to identify at-risk students. That's quite a mouthful. My colleague that helped me work on this was Dr. Vicky Pardo. To get started, we'll just talk a little bit about what the project entailed. And of course, I can't advance my slides. Give me just 1 minute. There we go. Our project was designed in 2 parts. The first section identified admission metrics that were correlated with outcome measures in our Doctor of Physical Therapy program. We wanted to determine the metrics which best identified at-risk students. And for our program, at-risk students did one of 2 things. They either had increased chances of being dismissed from the program, or they required several attempts to pass our national licensing exam. The second part of the study was to develop a remedial plan for those students we identified as at risk. We collected admission metrics and program outcomes for 114 students in cohorts in year 2020, 2021, and 2022. The inner circle shows the admission metrics we collected. It included demographic variables, age and gender, etc., many cognitive markers such as GRE and GPA, as well as two non-cognitive markers, Casper situational judgment tests, which have been used in medical school for some time and recently have started to be used in PT programs, as well as the Schwartz Portrait Value Questionnaire. The outer boxes are our outcome measures. They include GPA in program year 1, 2, and 3, comprehensive exams, which students take at the end of each year in the program, and 2 classes. In the first year, anatomy and an anatomy lab, and in the final year, semester, a class called clinical decision making, which is cumulative and very capstone based. As you can see, correlations were conducted between our admission metrics and our program outcomes. The blue colors show metrics which were significantly correlated. Significant correlations were then followed by multiple regression analysis to determine which correlations were best predictors of program outcomes. Significant predictors appear in red. Although, as you would expect, GPA and GRE were both predictors, were correlated, it was the GRE which was found to be the most significant. GRE is a standardized test and not institution dependent. Therefore, we were not surprised to see that GRE was a significant predictor of our standardized comprehensive examinations, and those exams are designed to help our students pass the licensing exam. Interestingly, however, the Schwartz Portrait Questionnaire, which is a non-cognitive marker, did have several correlations in comprehensive exam year 1, as well as clinical decision-making. 5 demographic variables, which included age, gender, race, Pell Grant status, and family history of college, were correlated with our program outcomes as well. Significant correlations are shown in blue. In general, gender was correlated with GPA in year 1 and 2, with females outperforming males. Race was also significantly correlated with those same GPA scores, as well as the comprehensive year 3 exam. Caucasian students outperformed minority students. And finally, Pell Grant status was correlated with 2 GPAs as well as the clinical decision-making class. Students who received Pell Grants performed lower than our non-Pell Grant recipients. Data was reviewed by faculty during curriculum and admission program meetings. Because standardized testing, such as GRE, was a significant predictor on program outcomes, and the licensing exam is a standardized test, a remedial plan was developed for students who failed our comprehensive exams, and our failure was a score below 70. In 2020, no remediation was offered for students who failed our comp exam. You can see students who failed on the first attempt, shown in blue, also failed on the second attempt, shown in orange. In 2021, a remedial plan was developed, which involved consultation with faculty advisors for any student who failed the comp exam. The average retake this time went above the passing rate of 70. In 2022, in addition to faculty advisor consultation, money from this grant paid student assistance to tutor any student who failed any comprehensive examination. Student tutors went underneath a standardized training, and they met with their assigned mentees 2 hours per week. Retakes in 2022 were at the highest at 71.82. I do want to note that although the scores continued to increase, there was no statistically significant difference between the scores, and we believe this is due to the small sample size, which ranged from 6 to 15. Following the success of this program, the physical therapy program plans to continue student tutors in the future and will pay for it out of their own budget. I do want to note that in 2022, the first time pass rate on our licensing exam was the highest since I've been at Wayne State at 97.4%. We do need to further assess the demographic variables. This is the first time we've looked at this, and we did find some significant correlations. And finally, we do have several non-cognitive admission metrics. We need to continue to examine these and see if they are worthwhile continuing. I want to take a moment to thank Christina Reed and Marie Pepin. They both helped chair the committees that reviewed and gave us an idea for how to use the grant money, and also Kathy Barrett, Darren Ellis, and the assessment grant reviewers for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So that was our third presentation, all of them awesome. So a round of applause, first of all, for our panelists. I hope that some of you have some questions that you'd like to ask our panelists. Start putting them in the chat, raise your hands. I want to highlight a couple of things that we saw in these projects that are just so impressive and for me really important in moving assessment forward and helping programs to use assessment data to make improvements in student learning. So I'm going to start with Sarah because her presentation was fresh in your mind. One of the things that I think is important to know is that Sarah and Vicki went out and researched how to think about at-risk students and what kind of data is appropriate for looking at whether a student is at risk and how that correlates. So they didn't come to the table with, oh, of course we have this random knowledge that we are now using. They said, this is a thing we're concerned about. How can we build on what we already know and add to it? Second thing that I think is a good point to highlight in their project is that they used existing data. So they are mining work that they're already doing to the advantage of their program, to the advantage of their students. The nice part about that is that the analyses they did with that existing data really broadens the context of how they think about their program, the factors that play a role in program outcomes down the line, and ways to identify how to make sure that all of their students are successful. So they're really being proactive in this project to think about how can we really do a better job for our students because we want them all to be successful. They have an awesome example here of how to close the loop. So for those of you not familiar with that phrase, closing the loop in assessment means that you assess something to find out where your baseline is, what's your base status. You introduce an intervention in the case of their program, the consultations with the faculty, and then the tutoring. And then you reassess to see if those changes, those interventions had a positive impact, which in this case, trending upward, although not statistically significant. I want to be clear with what Sarah was saying and line up with that. But what you can see out of this is that it was a valuable project because they found a tool, a strategy that does improve student learning, that is helping to support students in ways that they need. And they're going to continue doing that work. So fabulous way to approach it and think about the broad range of things that can have an impact on students and how to help them. I think the second, shifting back to Aline's project, this, one of my favorite things about actually all of these projects is that assessment isn't just about the measurement piece. So often I hear folks with concerns that, oh, assessment is just checking the boxes, it's just reporting some data. No, what you've seen in all these projects is that assessment, yeah, includes a measurement element, but it also includes so much conversation about what are we trying to do for students in this program? What is it that we want them to know? Are we all on the same page with that? If we're not on the same page, conversations around assessment can help us get on the same page. So we saw in Aline's project that there's core interdependence between curriculum design, assignment design, the way that you measure and how you improve your program. So all of those pieces come together. It's not just measuring some stuff and submitting some data. Those conversations really are one of the most important things for assessment, in my opinion. Some of her work also showed that assessment doesn't just mean more work. Sometimes it means streamlining. So when you find that an assessment tool isn't working the way that you want it to, or you find that you have overlapping data, sometimes you can say, hey, wait, we can do this differently, where we are using less of our resources, doing less work to get the same useful information and take action based on that. I also love in Aline's project, just the variety of assessment methods. So for those of you who are like, I don't know what our options are, ooh, Aline slides on, 1, 2, and 3, all of the different tools that they've used can give you some great ideas about that. And Neva's project, going back to the middle of the day, is a fabulous example of bringing together instructors to talk about what it is that you want to measure, how you're measuring it, how to apply scoring criteria so that you're all on the same page in what your goals are, which helps you move in the same direction, but also is a great way to communicate to students what it is you're looking for so they know how they're doing and how to get better at it. Also in Neva's project, in the social work project, you saw the impact of professional development. So bringing in a consultant to work on inter-rater reliability is not only about, how do you do the scores, but how do you think about the criteria in your rubric? How do you use that language to clarify what expectations are? And that not only led to improvement of that particular rubric, but as Neva said, has now been adapted across the program. So the project has had a cascading impact, not only on what they initially did for their project, but also more broadly. I think also an important piece of that project is just the importance of explicit awareness of what criteria you're actually using. So we as faculty often think, oh, sure, I know what an A looks like when I see it. But is my A the same thing as somebody else's A that's teaching the same course, that is in the same program? How do we make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, all setting the same targets? And of course, in a couple of these projects, supporting disciplinary accreditation, specialized accreditation as well. So those are my thoughts about the awesomeness of these three projects. So again, round of applause for our presenters. I would love to hear from you if you have some comments or some questions for our panelists. Would anybody like to jump in? I see Lynette. Yeah, Lynette.
Hi, this is just kind of commentary and Kathy, partly to you. Aileen and Sarah are both in my college, so I've seen, these projects as they've developed and been, really impressed with the outcomes that they bring. But what I really want to do, Kathy, is thank you for the work you do to create this culture of assessment that we have. And our program is currently undergoing our self-study for accreditation. And there's like this project in particular, when it came to the section we needed to do on interprofessional education, we were like, well, we know we have all this data because of, these projects and things that have already been done. And so having that culture is so important for our accredited programs because we have to show that we've closed the loop. And that is a really important part of our self-study and us saying that we should be accredited. So I want to give you that thank you and say how important it's been for our programs.
Thank you so much, Lynette. And that's awesome to have you here and to bring that perspective as a department chair to the broader context that this isn't just a small project, it's a project that has much broader impact. Terrific. Thanks so much. Anybody else want to chime in? Comments for the panelists or questions for the panelists?
Well, I just want to say great job to everyone. I always am very interested in hearing these grant proposal projects being a part of the University Assessment Committee. So I think it's a great way for others to see just various ways that they can do assessment. I know that Carrie had mentioned something in the chat about the hardest part for her is getting input and buy-in from the department. So does anyone, any of our presenters have any pieces of advice for that?
I think I can get started. For me, I think the biggest thing is that it was a project that the faculty were interested in because we want to know more. Are we wasting our time with what we collect data on in our admissions? So buy-in was much easier because people were already talking about it. It was a problem we had identified.
I want to tag along to Sarah's answer and say, there was a need for this work to be done. And once you identify a need, then the buy-in becomes a little easier. Especially in our case, like Lynette mentioned, this was something that we needed to prove for accreditation purposes. And ultimately was eye-opening to all of the stakeholders in the process of how valuable and important this work was. So starting with a need and then building the momentum around that helped us get everybody engaged. And there were many, many instructors that we needed to reach out to, collect information from. And once they understood the value and the need there, they were very cooperative.
And I think one important way to get buy-in is to use what you find, that closing the loop, as Kathy said earlier. We're definitely doing that. And if we didn't, we're just checking the box and then everybody's not going to be on board to participate.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question to the three of you. So you talked about identifying a need. And a thing I often say to folks is listen to what you and your colleagues complain about. That's probably a need. Do students struggle with X? Oh, why do they always have problems with? Why do they always get stuck in course X? Why is assessment so burdensome? Why doesn't it give us any useful information? Like all of those complaints for me are good identifiers of needs. What were your strategies for identifying needs?
Again, I can start off. For us, the accrediting body had changed the requirements for first-time pass rate. And when I first came to Wayne State, we were hovering in the 80%, which is not very good. I think 85% is a trigger. And so we recognized that this had to change or we could possibly be put on probation. So I think even though accrediting is not fun, it does have some advantages in that it makes you look at your program seriously. And so those external entities can sometimes force you to look at what you need to change.
Accreditation was a driver for our program as well. But I'd like to add another variable was that I was new to the program. And I think, being a new element there gave me that motivation to understand how projects link together and see the bigger picture and try to connect the dots. And I think this was a perfect way for me and the team members to understand and connect the dot and see that, eagle view of what we offer and how each of the offering longitudinally prepare our students, the depth and breadth of what we're teaching them, the variety of assessment tools that we're utilizing. Are we over-assessing? Are we under-assessing? And so it allowed us to look holistically at the program because of both reasons.
I think we were motivated by confusion, and that is that our results in the past, we were looking at, we have different, we used to have a cohort in Macomb, we have to present those data separately for our accrediting body, and we had different instructors in these places. And so we weren't sure if we were it was the program that was causing the change or if it was the instructor. And so not being able to figure out, what our data was telling us was what drove us to try this.
Thanks everyone for that. I just added a link in the chat to the 2022 projects that are a little more than halfway through their cycle, just because all three programs that are represented here today have a specialized accreditation. So I don't want folks in the room to think that, accreditation drives assessment grant projects. I think there may be one project that is currently underway that you'll hear about next year. I think only one of the current ones is an accredited program. So don't feel like if you don't have accreditation for your program, you shouldn't do an assessment grant. And on that note, thinking about this year's call for proposals. So as I mentioned, the call for proposals, I think Chloe has put it in the chat already. The call for proposals is due June 26th. It is not a cumbersome application. But what I would like to know from our panelists is what advice you have for folks who are thinking, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do one. Is it worth my time? What advice would you give folks who at least have this on their radar about going through the proposal process?
I can start. I think having a cohort or a partner in crime is important, because that's the person that's going to help. You can motivate each other, whether that's 1, 2, 4 people. And the second thing is I reached out to Kathy early in the process, and she was invaluable to me to help guide and change our project slightly. And so mine is not a traditional project that you think of for grant assessment, but with her advice and her help, she helped guide us in a different way. And part of it was we did not know how we were going to spend the end of the money because we didn't know what outcomes we were going to find. And so how we spent the money changed when we discovered that, hey, let's try the student tutor thing. So that's also an advantage, is you might be able to be flexible and respond based on what you find. So it was a very interesting process.
For us, I think this project made it possible, like Neva's project, to have a consultant, which I didn't mention earlier. So we did also consult with an expert in IPE assessment, but we also were able, because of the funding, to get a research assistant who specialized in data visualization and data analysis. So that was a plus to our team. It also made the project sizable, because sometimes you think you can do everything in assessment, and ultimately you have to be practical and you have to come up with a project that is doable. And I think this is the conversations we've had with Kathy helped us tailor the project so that it becomes something that we can undertake, achieve, and learn from. So we're grateful for that. Thank you.
And I will echo my colleagues that it's really helpful to talk this through with Kathy. I have an idea for a different program we have an idea for a different program for next year. And I've already begun conversations with Kathy to talk about, how does that fit in, and what are some ways that we might structure it. So I also agree with the flexibility that to have that flexibility and have that ongoing consult is very helpful.
Thanks. And I will note that this is Neva's second assessment grant project. So she did one, what was that, 3 years ago, Neva? And a question came. Yeah. And a question came up earlier about, if you've already gotten a grant, can you apply for another one? The answer is yes, you can. There is no time delay, so you can apply every year if you want to. There are restrictions, however, in that you cannot get continuing money for the same project, so it has to be a separate project. There is still a limit of 1 project per department or unit, depending on whether you're departmentalized or not. And also, if you look at the rubric that I see Chloe also posted in the chat for you, you'll see that programs that have not had a grant before get higher weight. They get priority if the rest of the proposal is of equal quality. So keep that in mind, but definitely encourage you to go ahead and talk to me. Absolutely invite you, as I said, to talk about any part of your thinking about assessment, whether it's, yeah, maybe I want to do a grant, or I just have a general question about what we're doing for assessment. Last question I'd like to ask the panelists is, you talked about the changes to your program, you talked about the benefits to the program, but how did working on this project and developing this grant proposal affect you as an individual professional? So what was the individual professional impact of doing this work for you?
So once again, it looks like I'll start. I think for myself and Vicki, because of this work, we got involved with a national organization that's looking at assessment practices across the country. And so we have had a presentation done from that group. They recognized the value, and it was really, really helpful to see what other people were doing. So it's a new line of scholarship for us, and we have new connections across the US.
And for next, I think now we established an order. And for me, this was a very an excellent opportunity for professional and personal growth within the team that I've been working with since I joined in this new position, and for us to learn from each other. and grow together in our understanding of what we offer and how we each contribute, and the true interprofessional nature and the beauty of what we have within the Eugene Applebaum. We have some amazing disciplines that are all thriving and preparing students to be the best healthcare providers out there. And I think we can work together to optimize this and offer the best that can be presented out there. This project as well kind of made me put my feet on the ground, in the sense that I was like, we want to do it all. Let's do every possible, assessment that can be done. And then I was humbled by my colleagues and, through discussions made to understand that assessment sometimes need to be manageable and brought back to elements that could truly have an impact. And so I truly appreciated those conversations with my colleagues and the growth that happened there.
For me, I've read about what inter-rater reliability is and, understand it's conceptually, but actually going through this process kind of in a grassroots kind of way with the instructors, it sort of made it come alive. I know for our BSW coordinator, this process was very illuminating, and she's gone on now to work with other sets of instructors on going through this process. So we have all grown.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all three of you, not only for your time today and your awesome presentations and sharing all this information with our audience, but also for all the work that you've done, not only with this project over the last 2 years, but in your assessment in your programs, because each of you does more than what anybody has seen today. And I know that often that goes unappreciated. Clearly not in Lynette's department, because she's fantastic, and definitely not with Heather's people. I see the two of them right at the top of my screen because they're both very, very clear about their appreciation for people's work. But the work that you've done really has a positive impact on students, on your colleagues, on your programs, and ultimately on Wayne State. So I really value that work, and I know that I am not alone in saying thank you so much for that. I also want to thank Chloe, who is new to the Darren Ellis's team. So she just started last Monday and already has jumped right in to help out with this event today. So she will be, you'll see her name popping up in different aspects of Darren's work, my work, Kelly Dormer, who's doing first year interest groups and some other things, and Shantae Mintline Harris, who does academic program review and accreditation. So welcome to Chloe. And then just a final reminder that the 2023 call for proposals, there's a link to that in the chat along with the rubrics, so that you can start looking at that and thinking about what you might want to propose. Have a chat with me. I do not serve as a reviewer specifically so that I can help folks with the proposal process. So don't feel like there's any conflict of interest. I'm definitely here to support you. And with that, I don't see any more questions in the chat. Any last comments from anybody in the room? I see some thank yous. I see some kudos up earlier in the chat. All right. Terrific. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and good luck with the last weeks of the semester as well. Take care, everyone.